Hello, and welcome to the Permian Podcast, where we focus on nature conservation for the public good. Today, our special guest is Dr. Miguel Milano, expert and senior advisor at Permian Brazil. Welcome, Miguel, to the show.
Thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to speak here.
You're very welcome. First of all, could we start with maybe a little bit of your background academically, and then your career in conservation? We could go into that.
Okay, perfectly. Yes, I did forest engineer at the university, and I also got a master and PhD degree in forest science. And then I took around 25 years as a professor in a university in Brazil, the oldest faculty in forest science in Brazil, with master and doctoral degree, teaching, advising, master and PhD, also degrees, theses, and dissertations, and doing research. And at some point, I started to have a kind of a double life, also working in practical conservation in public institutions like states and also the federal government. I had for some months the position of the head of the protected areas in Brazil. That was exactly at the time of the Rios Conference, '92. And you can imagine the situation, the pressure on that situation. That is my general background in doing research, doing practical services in conservation for states and federal government, and a long time also running organizations, not public, but private public organization, I would say, some way, foundations like the Boticário Foundation for Nature Conservation. That's, I would say, the main private funded foundation in Brazil for conservation.
I see. One sort of side question for you is, on the podcast, we ask people how they kind of got into conservation and their specific field. Was there some kind of moment when you were young where you thought, I have to get into the forest science kind of aspect of conservation?
That is a really good question. Thank you for asking that, because that is part of the reason for all this situation, all my work. I was born in a very small town. It's not a town properly. It's a small village in the backcountry areas of Paraná State. Paraná State is one of the southern states of Brazil, the most developed area. And possibly you would not imagine that 15, 16 years ago, we still do not have any electricity in the areas like that, in this most developed part of the country. And I was born there. I grew up until 11 years old there. And the main things for me to have fun was to go to the forest, to fish, to hunt, swim in the rivers and things like that. Yes, exactly. And when I needed to leave my home to study a little bit more, I started to live out in kind of schools with the intern programs, and then more and more out of home, and used to come back to my home just in the holidays time. And I started to feel that most of my forests and my hills were far and far from my home, because always being what they say in the past, and also to use to say the same today, developed. Not, it was not developed, it was being destroyed. And I started to feel with no counterbalancing information that was wrong or right. It was not the issue, but I started just to feel that the lack of my place. And that moved me. When I arrived to the university, started the university, I discovered, until that time I had no idea. I was thinking about to do a kind of mechanical engineering or civil engineering, and I discovered this career called forest engineer. And see, this should be the right way. And I did that. But the main orientation, the career by the time was, how to correctly, I would say, use the forest, talking about how to explore, how to cut, and how to process the wood, and also how to plant intensive forest plantation, reforestation, things like that. And that was, I think, the start of the turn in my life to go to conservation, because it was not that I was looking for and that I wanted. And I started to study by myself, reading books, articles, and things like that. until I found my way to move that. And then I worked for conservation from that moment and become more a self-made person in conservation, just studying and connecting with people in Brazil, important ones that become my friends, also important researchers abroad in other universities, especially in US and some other countries of Latin America. And then that made it possible for me to run this career in conservation, I would say.
Wonderful. It's just fascinating that somebody has a moment in their youth and then that just sets them on a course. And for you, that was the forest and then forest science. Are there many forest science engineers? Is this a popular career path in Brazil for people? Is there a lot of interest in this?
We have lots of universities with this career in Brazil. In Paraná, that's just 2% of the area of the country. And well, let's see. I could not say now at the percent of the population here, but is a state with around 10 million inhabitants, and we should have, I guess, 4 or 5 different schools of forest science in this state. If you go to Santa Catarina, other 3 or 4, in Rio Grande do Sul, other 3 or 4. If you go to the Amazon, all the states has 2 or 3 in this. Most of these schools is still running more for, I would say, economic purpose of use of the forest, but directly saying, not indirect, not the other benefits. Is still looking for wood, I could say, the right way to use the forest eventually, or to just fulfill the legal needs to explore the forest. That is the main orientation, I'd say, not conservation. Conservation was really important in some of the forest schools, like one in São Paulo, the USP, Paraná State, and Minas Gerais one. I would say that 4 or 5 of the forest schools in Brazil were oriented to conservation, but it means 85 or 80% at least are much more oriented to the economic use of the wood.
So it's focusing around the economics of forest use rather than directly conservation and preservation, and reforestation.
Important to mention that the economic could be biodiversity conservation, could be tourism in the forest, could be indirect use of the forest, but is much more direct use of the wood. That is the economic main orientation, I would say.
So let's move on to sort of the topic, the title really, and the topic of the podcast today, which is entitled Sustaining Our Shared Spaces, very much, leaning into the forest and that in particular in tropical forest areas like Brazil, and managing public land for the public good. Could you unpack what you think about that title? What does that mean to you?
Very, very tough question, because it brings some ideas, since when you have the idea of private land and public land, when we divide that situation, I would say along of the development of the societies, the kind of the sense we have of the private property comes from the Middle Ages until the 100 years ago, that was developed all this process when the noble landlords started to share, not because they want, but because was needed, the society, and pressure that. And the UK is a good example of that situation that created the trail or the road for this process. And we have him thinking, most of the European countries, more private land than public land. In Brazil, we will still have a little bit different situation. Even if we have more private land, we have a huge part of the country in public land. In public in different conditions, because the indigenous lands are public because they are federal land. They are for the use and the benefit of the indigenous people, but they are public land. This is one point. The second point is that we have the called protected areas in different scales and systems that are public. And we also have in Brazil huge piece of land, if I can say that, a piece of the cake, that is not defined yet, if public or private. It is still under the government to define if it will be public as protected area or indigenous land or any other proposal, or if it will be given as private to be developed. Then we have this situation here. It's important to have that situation clear before, because many of the philosophical, the idea of public lands come from this thinking. Everything is to go and to be appropriated by people. No. I would say. It's not right. And if in that part that can be private, should be well cared, should be really well conserved in order to keep the conditions for the life, the human life at least in this planet. This is a really important part. I'm being really anthropocentric at this point, but it's to help to people to understand. If you do not care about the nature, it will be impossible for us to survive here. This is one point. Going now to the central point of your question, yes, it is really important we have more and more, while it's possible, public land. And public must be collective, must be, the benefit must be shared, but also should be collective responsibility to care that land and to protect that land, to receive the benefits we need, like climate stability, pollination, fertility of the soil, and many other things. We need that space for recreation is another example, tourism. Well, this public lands in different scale can bring lots of economic benefits, if not the direct benefit, to avoid the many losses we have, the things we lost in different situations of climate events.
If I could go a little bit back into what you just said and go deeper, in our kind of area of conservation, we talk about environmental services, and that maybe is not so easy to understand for general people outside of science and conservation. Of course, saving the forest helps the biodiversity and it helps the weather systems and stuff like that. But for the people, say, that, as you said, the indigenous people, what are the kind of the benefits for them for protecting the forest and maybe, reforesting and those kind of conservation ideas?
It's not so difficult, I would say. It's difficult for some people to understand that situation because there is no background information during the regular education for all the people. I think we should have the regular education since the starting of the process until the university, always having some information, good information in education regarding the environmental issues. We have about civics, we have about some other things, well, we have about the history, but we do not have about the environment we live in, the nature we depend on. And that should be understood. That would be much easier. But one example I could give you, Mike, is a big tree in the Amazon, for sure, will transpire at least 1 ton of water, 1,000 liters of water a day, at least, eventually 2. If too big, eventually 3. And where this water goes? Go to the sky, and there it will move according to the wind. And this brings rain to the southern part of the country. This is really important. If we do not have a plants to transpire, we would have probably just half of the rain we have, because half come from the oceans, but the other half come from the transpiration of the plants. Is one example. People has no idea about plants transpire. As one example, to have rain here in the south, I would say, well, also to have rain in part of the Argentina, also to have rain in part of the Paraguay, we should keep the Amazon forest standing. And to keep that standing, if we have a hard pressure for other goods, well, we should be able to compete, paying for that. If it's much more profitable some way for people cut and plant soil, they will do that. If we have ways to pay more to conserve standing, they will do that. Then it's part of the the policies, or the public policies we should work to make this working on the ground, benefiting the indigenous people, as an example, benefiting the local economy, benefiting, well, the private owner of a land, because he or she could receive more, conserving and not destroying. That is part of the situation. But it's really interesting to mention that, because we have an important scientist, Breach, I guess, that recently said, I think in a book, that, well, conservation itself is easy. Ecology is not too difficult. The big issue to do conservation is to move the public policies to make that. Also convincing the society that we will elect the politicians that will do the thing. That is the trick part of this discussion.
To come back to what you said, I think, perhaps in Brazil, maybe it should be a subject at school, forest science. There should be chemistry, biology, physics, and forest science, so that people get that.
Or conservation, not
Yeah.
just for science. I'm trying about conservation and what is behind conservation. That would be part in everywhere, in UK, in Brazil, in US.
So let's look at the challenges and solutions. So maybe a couple of challenges that you're facing, and maybe talk about projects that you're currently working on or in progress, and some of the challenges faced, maybe even starting a project, to initiate conservation. Could you expand on some of those things?
Yeah, sure. Well, many good examples could be given regarding the challenges. I will try to bring two different examples that seem is interesting for me at this point. One is the case of the Iguaçu National Park in Paraná State. That is a nice piece of the territory with almost 200,000 hectares. It's 180,000. In the Brazil side, the other side of the border, we have the Argentinian one with more other 50,000 and plus provincial state park in Argentina with other, I think 800. That's a huge piece of land together, a kind of mosaic that forms a big corridor. In the middle of that, we have the really nice waterfalls that bring only in the Brazilian side around 2 million visitors a year. But that kind of visitor, that kind of situation, tourists, around half of that coming from outside, bringing dollars to our economy, create lots of jobs, create many of the employees, direct or indirectly, since the taxi drivers, until the hotels, the restaurants, and all that process move a huge economy in that, a huge piece of the economy in that town, that city. The other part probably comes from the Itaipu Dam, probably today the second biggest dam in the world regarding the energy generation. That's between Brazil and Paraguay, and well, also brings lots of the benefit for the economy. But the two big, and the one create a small number of jobs, the Itaipu, and tourism in the national park, lots of. But people many times think, we should have just the waterfalls protected. It doesn't mind if you do not have the rest, would not possible to have the waterfalls. It's one point, but very, very interesting. Public land, many times threatened by different tries of invasions and things like that to use the land for other purposes. It's one thing. The other very good example is the one we are running with Permian in the Rondônia state. I mentioned now the forest carbon project we are running at the extractive reserve of Rio Caltário in Rondônia state. That is one category of protected area under our legislation, the framework of protected areas in Brazil, that is created when we have traditional people depending on extractive products of the forest. In that case, the rubber and the Brazil nut, especially, but also açaí, that's very popular nowadays all around the world. That is the main three extractive products in the area. The population there, they have been fighting first to create and then to protect the land, almost abandoned by the state. Well, they got the land, they have the area formally created in a formal act, but they are living by themselves there. We arrived there as they asked in a public selection to implement this kind of project. We, Permian, won the competition, I would say, by 92 votes in the community against 1, almost unanimous. And the project now brings services payment monthly we do for every family living there. It's 1 point. The same amount, if we sum up like that, the total we pay for the families a month, we also donate for the state, climate fund of the state, to create a fund to do the same in other places, or at least to protect the other protected areas that are not really protected. It's 1 point. But we also invest in development of the community in order they can move things and do better what they do. They can keep the extractive process they have, but we are trying to create and to aggregate value to the to that product. We are moving them, aggregating value to the product for them. It's one thing. Well, we do many other things. We will also create around the 30 jobs in the community to really protect the areas. We do the monitoring process of the area to avoid the invasions and other kind of illegal activities. And we have been working through the community and with the community, and also close to some authorities, protecting the land and improving the quality of the life of that community. In an average, it's possible to say that community itself, the community that lives, or we have locally saying 7 different communities inside, but I'm saying communities as the whole group living inside the reserve. In that case, I would say that the project brought at least we fold, and eventually we can say 3 times more income for the families, considering the environment service payment, but also what they were possible for them to move the things with their product, because now they have the security to have a minimum from the environment service payment. With that, they can discuss the price, the products they will sell. And before, they just need to sell for the first one that arrived there to buy. Now they say, no, I want to have this. And if the person wants to buy, don't pay, they wait for another one, because they can wait now, because they have the security of one payment. That moved the economic condition of them. It's so interesting, the situation, that the closest supermarket of the reserve told us before they didn't like to sell to the people of the reserve without money. Now they can sell by internet, because we provide the internet to them, and also the supermarket hired 3 or more people to deliver the goods in the reserve. See that's creating jobs around. We went to the bank, and the bank manager told us that, well, they are giving loans to the people of the reserve, because they use the contract of environment service payment as a support, as a secure for the bank, that they know they can receive the payments for the loan. This simple project that make possible to conserve 46 hectares and 46,000 hectares in that region is moving an entire economy around. And the people now that were much prouder now about the work they do, because before they have some kind of discrimination. They are the poor people living inside the forest. Now they are the kind of guardians of the forest, and they are moving the economy. They are bringing benefits to the small town and the society around. That is different. 2 very different situations, one the Iguaçu and the other the Resex of Rio Caltário, that brings impressive direct economy in the process. But I did not mention the other benefits like climate protection and resilience and climate stability and water and rain, in biodiversity, in pollination, and many other things we could have. I'm saying just about the economy that 2 different kinds of projects could bring to in both of them without cutting trees. That is the main issue. Coming back to my history in forestry engineering, not using directly the wood, but trying to bring the economy to move all the process in the economy, doing other things, tourism, indirect use, supporting the community, and paying for some way to help to save the life in this planet.
I think there's so much to unpack in what you just said, and there's so much information and so much value to what you just said. What occurs to me is there needs to be a shift in thinking in people. As you said, if you can't shift the thinking in people, you can't shift the emphasis on the forest and the value of the forests. It just will not work. It doesn't matter what you do. As you said, it boils down to it's wood and it's a resource, and then how they get that will either damage the forest or do something else. I would say that you've seen it on the ground with Caltário, that the communities, I'm sure that they've changed their thinking. Is it something that you've kind of put into their minds with the project, and they can grow that themselves in their own minds and keep that mindset to keep being guardians in the future? What's the roadmap for the long term for this project?
I think we still have a long road to get a more clear understanding, even for the local people. They understand the benefit. They want to keep that. They understand some way that the benefits are because they are working as the guardians of the area, but they still needed to move a lot regarding their mindset, because that was not the mindset was created, was forged. That was completely different situation. That is one point. But regarding your, take in mind your words in your question, you mentioned the value of the forest. In one point for them, I would say it's not exactly just the value. The value they can understand eventually when talking. They know about that. But value is one thing, and price is another thing. One thing could be impossible to calculate the value, but the price they can understand. The price is what you pay. And well, it's difficult to talk about these two small words, value and price. But the price is what the people can understand, because it will make difference for their life. And well, the price is what they are receiving for the product, how much change the value is the new price they have. And that is part of the conversation we must help them to understand, and also to help them to always think about and always say to the government and to the others, we want the real value, we want a better price, we want things like that. That is part of the situation that I think we will take is still a long road to move the mindset that's not cutting the trees, but making the forest or keeping the forest standing, that will change their life potentially.
Excellent, interesting stuff. Just to kind of finish things up, in light of everything that we just discussed, which is a whole ocean of things to talk about and details and information on the project and the value, as you said, and price, could you kind of summarize today's discussion with, say, 3 really important points, what you feel are really important about conservation, the project, community, all those things may be wrapped up? Is there 3 most important points to you that stick out from today's discussion?
It's the toughest. It's very, very difficult, very difficult. One key issue and the challenge is the quality of the education for everybody. I put before the idea for the public outside, the general public, the general society must understand more. And then emphasizing conservation as its real value for the planet and for the society is a key challenging. We need to put that in the scene. The political scenario, the political arena must include this idea. It's not just the environmental education. It's a little bit different, I'm trying to say. This is one point. A second really important one is economical funds to move this process while we still have time to do something regarding climate change, as an example. And it also include having funds, also should include the process to move the funds, go to the people, to real benefit the people. It can be the indigenous people, it can be the traditional communities, it can be the private owner of the land that is doing the right thing. Because I also want to bring to this conversation the importance of the private land, not the ones just to use it for soybean plantation or cattle ranching. No, it's the ones that can be shared in different kind of production, and one is nature production. Nature production can be from reforestation, restoration, but also just keeping the area conserved. I think this is 2 very critical points, and the 2 of them sets on the political arena. How to change the mind of the politicals in to understand this and to move this, because their mindset that was created in the other times with other values in other conditions. I want to say that, well, many of the environmental services you have, we are still benefit today, Mike, always were for free. But it won't be possible to keep it doing for free, because if we have now 80 billion people in the planet and we are looking more and more for land to produce goods for them, how to compete conserving? It's impossible. And the mindset is still that one. In some ways, I think I'm an exception of the people of my age thinking what I think. For sure, we have lots of other exceptions, for sure. Yeah, we have people doing that, many more in the world, but we are collectively say few ones doing that. And it's hard, this few group of people in the world moving politicians to another mindset. That is critical, I would say. Then education, economics, and political. I would say that is the main challenge for this process.
Really, really interesting stuff. Thank you for bringing those key points to the end of the discussion. And thank you so much, Miguel, today for talking and sharing your time and your insights and expertise on this massive subject of conservation and managing of public land for the benefit of the local people and the broader ecosystems and the earth in itself. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for the opportunity.